Salam. I got 8.5 IELTS score with less than a month of preparation. In this video, I will share my experience with the test, I will tell you how I prepared for the test, and I will tell you everything I know about approaching the IELTS test. My name is Ehsan Musavi. I'm a former IELTS teacher. I've been away from teaching for 2-3 years, but I still been working in English. I chose to give the IELTS test as a part of the process of immigration, and when the test opened up in Iran, I knew that I'm going to have to do it as soon as possible because I didn't know what's going to happen in the future. As you might have known, the test had been closed in Iran for some time, but once they opened up again, I actually reserved the test, and I didn't actually give myself a lot of prep time because I just wanted to finish it and I wanted to go through that challenge and get ready for the other parts of my process. So I didn't give myself too much time for preparation, and I just gave myself 1 month of getting ready, getting to know what the actual latest tests are and how I was going to approach each of them. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually talk about the materials that I used, how I strategized to go through each test, what plans I had, what I thought about the test. And once I go after the preparation phase, I'm going to talk about what happened during the test itself. And then I will go through how I felt about what I did during the test, and then once I received the scores, how they compared to the actual assumptions that I had in my head. So I will talk about each of the skills separately. So I will go through all this process for each of the skills. So I hope this video isn't too long in the end, but I really am going to share everything that I know, every experience I had. So I hope this is useful. Just like the test itself, I will start with the listening section. Being an English teacher and actually being familiar and exposed to all the English materials throughout my life, I didn't think that I was going to have any problems with the listening test, and I thought that I was going to be quite ready for actually comprehending everything and being able to just do the test easily. But once I actually opened those Cambridge books and once I started listening to the test, I realized that I'm having 4 or 5 mistakes, and that was something that was quite surprising and worrisome for myself because I really was aiming to get the perfect score, and realizing that it's not as easy as I thought was quite stressful for myself. So the problem that I had mainly was the part 2 and 3 of the listening test. I didn't seem to be able to completely follow all the questions. I didn't have the time to read the questions themselves in order to prepare myself, and I always seemed to miss a few tests because of this. So I didn't have a lot of problems in part 1 and part 4, but part 2 and 3 proved to be quite challenging at times. And that was the main challenge that I had because I didn't want to miss anything, as I mentioned. So there were a few things that I could do to resolve this. So like most people use a technique for tackling listening questions called keyword research or keyword finding, but it's mainly the same idea that you just need to read the questions first, and you should find and highlight the keywords that are actually differentiating that question from the other one. And you would try to highlight the important part of the answers so that once you're listening to the audio track, you would know what to look for, what to listen to in that audio track. But the problem with the computer-delivered IELTS test is that you don't really have much time to read all the questions, and you don't get to read all the questions and highlight everything, especially because of the fact that you have to use a mouse and a keyboard to underline or highlight the words, and you don't have a pencil to easily underline any word that you want. So that's something that needs a lot of practice. You have to be fast, you have to be quite on your toes in order to be able to highlight all the important parts. So as I mentioned, the main challenge for keyword finding is not having enough time. And if you can actually find a way to gain some time, to make the most of the time available at your disposal, you can actually face the questions quite easier, and you can have a much more comfortable time listening to the audio tracks and answering the questions. So what I did was I actually brought back to life those dead times when the audio track is repeating something, the instructions, or all the pauses that are available for you to just read the questions. And I realized that by doing this, by using this technique, I was actually quite able to read everything and prepare for every question. So here's the trick. You can actually skip the questions in the computer delivered IELTS test. You can actually go forward. You don't have to listen to for example, part 1 and just look at the questions for part 1. You can skip to part 3, part 2 easily. And knowing that, when the audio track, when the examiner, the instructor, whoever, when they start to talk, like when they say, this is your IELTS test, the test is in 4 parts. When they're saying those things, you can actually skip to part 2 or 3 and start highlighting the questions. You can start reading the questions then. And once the examiner said, now you have some time to read the questions 1 to 7, 1 to 6, it's only then that you have to go back to part 1. I understand that this is quite stressful. This might be an added challenge, but it's worth it. If you practice with the PDF version of the Cambridge books, you can actually test this quite easily, just the back and forth, just going back, going forward. Once you practice that, in the test itself, you're not going to have a really hard time doing that because the mouse traction is faster. You can actually highlight faster. You have to click right. You have to choose highlights to highlight, but it's not going to be something that's impossible to do. That's much easier to master. That's much easier to learn than just being able to focus on every word and trying to be fast at reading. You can save a lot of time doing this. So the first tip is to use that initial minute of instructions to highlight the words. Because the questions of 1 to 10, because part 1 questions are quite easier and quite much more straightforward, then you can just read the questions and answer them easily. And then as you write the answer for question number 10, the examiner might be still talking, they might still be giving you some other information that's quite unnecessary. Once you wrote the answer for number 10, you can still just right away, you can move to question 11 and save that time too. So it's about just bringing these times back to life. It's about making the most of these times that's going to give you that time that's necessary for you to highlight all the questions and read the questions and be able to be prepared for the upcoming audio track. So as you answer question number 10, you move to reading question 11, and then you realize that you have actually completely highlighted all the part 2 questions. And then if you have time, you go to part 3. Or if you don't have the time, as you finish question number 20, then you move to just reading and preparing for part 3 questions. And this back and forth is something that's going to give you enough time. This is going to provide you with enough time to be able to be prepared for all the questions, to do that highlighting of the words just as you do with the paper-based questions. And this is how I managed to get band 9, the perfect score, in the listening test. By doing this technique, by mastering this technique, I was able to be prepared for all the questions. I knew what's going to happen. I had already created an assumption, an idea about the answer for that question. So the listening part wasn't quite challenging for me, and I was able to confidently go past that and get to the reading section. And this is somehow what I expected. When I received the scores, I knew that maybe because of bad luck or just because of me not understanding everything, I would get an 8.5. So I was ready for an 8.5 out of 9, but happily and luckily for myself, I was able to get a band 9, which was really good. And so that's my idea about the listening. I really don't have much more to say. I have to say that I learned this technique from my personal IELTS tutor. I'm going to provide her information below here, because everybody asks me like who you spend time with, like who actually prepared you for the test. And so I'm going to just provide you with her information down below, just in the description of the video, and maybe here in the edit of the video as well. So if you want, you can contact her. I know that she's quite busy, but I think she is going to be able to actually be helpful to you. So just, I'm going to say that I'm going to share her credentials. So if you wanted any classes or any kind of preparation, you can actually contact her. I was quite happy with her training of myself. And yeah, so now let's move on to the reading part. So for the reading part, I would actually argue that the computer delivered IELTS is much easier for the reading questions than the paper-based IELTS, because you at all times you have the text right on the left hand side and you have the questions on the right hand side, so you don't have to flip through pages, you don't have to go back and forth with the paper. Everything is right there and right then. And so you have the timer right up there, everything is in the same place. And for myself, I was quite comfortable answering the question. It wasn't really challenging. I would say that the general reading questions are relatively easier than the reading for the academic test. But I would say that the last part of the reading was quite challenging. It was, the most of the test was quite similar to Cambridge books, but the last part of the reading questions was something that was quite uncommon. Like, it wasn't that crazy, it wasn't that different, but what happened was, it was this huge reading, like this passage, or I would say, I don't know what they're called, like 8-9 paragraphs. And the question, the topic was about making glass, the history of glass making in the world. And the question was, there were so many different ethnicities or groups of people or nationalities that have actually contributed to making glass throughout the history. And you would have to say which ethnicity, which nationality did which. So there was like 10 tasks that had been done throughout the history, and there were 7 nationalities, and you would have to read all the text and choose which nationality did what. And that was quite challenging. It wasn't that hard. It was just, I was unfamiliar with that question. But happily, again, luckily, I was able to answer all the questions perfectly well. Again, I would say that even if you're a perfect English user, you would actually expect to miss a few questions. So an 8.5 is quite the same as band 9. It's not like someone that has band 9 in listening or reading can comprehend everything better than an 8.5. It's all about luck, it's about the question type, it's about just small misunderstandings can make you make a mistake. So don't really worry about that. So I was expecting that I would get 8.5, but again, I was happily, proud to say that I got a band 9 in the reading as well, and I was quite satisfied with it. So the technique that I used, I wouldn't actually call this a technique, but I always tend to read the questions first and then look for the answers for that question in the text itself. So it's not like I just read the whole passage, understand it at first, and then look at the questions. Especially in the general training, the questions are relatively simple, and a lot of times you have to write the word itself, so you would know where to look exactly. And a lot of people actually highlight the reading too, just like in listening. That's something that can be quite helpful. I would suggest, if you're comfortable doing that, you can always do that. You don't really have any problems with anything, and that's definitely going to be helpful. For myself, I really don't have much to say about reading because I didn't do much different. I was quite comfortable reading the questions and answering them. I would say that practice with Cambridge, look for the explanations, especially for those true, false, not given questions. And then you can compare how the answers are structured. Why are some questions not given? Why are some questions false or true? And then if you just understand the logic behind answering these questions, what counts as a not given? Like sometimes you might think that something is quite obviously true, but if it is not mentioned in the article itself, then it is not given. So while something might seem that's quite a common sense answer, and while you might think that, of course it's that, if it's not mentioned, then it's not given, and that's the idea behind not given. So I would suggest reading the explanations that are available online, especially for the Cambridge books. There's tons of materials available, and since these are the most standard questions, then these are the type of questions you're going to face in the test itself. So yeah, that would be something that's quite helpful for understanding how the answers work, how the options work for each test. And then, for the other types of questions, such as the ones that you have to write the exact word, they're just lovely because they're quite easy to find in the text itself, and you can just highlight, you can compare. Something that can be definitely useful to you is the progression of the answers. So if you're looking for the answers, you should understand that the question number 2's answer is definitely before question number 3's answer. So that's definitely going to be helpful if you're looking for answers and you don't know which is which. You should understand that the progression of the question is exactly the same as the progression of the text. So that's something that you can obviously use in your advantage in order to be able to find which word is the correct answer. Now we move on to the writing section. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. I definitely expected myself to get a better score than 7.5. I'd really, the amount of stress that I had for the speaking test was actually quite higher than the writing, unlike most people. Most people's main worry is writing, and mine wasn't, but still I got the least score compared to the other skills for the writing test. I actually felt quite good about it, especially my task 1, it was quite nice, and I wrote a lot. But later I understand, just like my personal tutor told me, maybe my main problem was that I wrote too long. Like, I always kept explaining everything, and, the minimum amount of words that you have to write for the task 2 is 250 words, and I tend to write about 350 words, like 100 words more. And because of this, I actually struggled with the timing. There was a time in the actual test that I looked at the timer. I had less than 10 minutes, and I hadn't written paragraph 3 and the conclusion, which was quite stressful. I rushed that, and maybe that was the part that cost me, my score. Happily, I got 7.5, which helps you get the CLB 10, and it gives you the maximum amount of points for most immigration criteria. But the problem was that I know that I wrote too long. My tutor always kept telling me, and she always insisted on that, but I just couldn't stop myself from writing, and probably that was the thing that cost me the score, especially in the coherence and cohesion band of the writing. I think that would cost you a lot of scores. So pay attention to writing concisely, writing just what the question is asking you. I think for task 2 in the writing, something that's definitely going to be helpful to you is knowing the question types. I don't really believe that there's this, fixed structure for each writing question, but I think in each paragraph, that is the body paragraph, unlike the introduction and the conclusion, all the main paragraphs that are either the causes or your opinion or whatever, you have to have an example, you have to have a topic sentence, you have to have some sentences that support your topic sentence. My tutor really helped me in this case. She actually went through all the question types. She actually explained the way I have to think in order to have ideas. And so yeah, I think this is quite nice because if you know the types of questions that are going to appear in the test itself. You can have a lot of preparation. You can actually create a mindset and a structure. The structure that I followed, which allowed me to have 7.5, which isn't the perfect score, but it's still really nice, was in the introduction, I paraphrased the main sentence of the question, like the main question, I paraphrased that. Then I shortly and concisely mentioned the main body paragraphs, and then if that was an opinion question, I would give my opinion, I would state my answer. And then in the body paragraph, there's this topic sentence which explains the main idea behind that body paragraph. Then there are a few supporting sentences, and then there's an example. Same thing with the body paragraph number 2, and then with the conclusion, again, no new ideas introduced, just a summary of the ideas and the causes or the advantages, disadvantages, whatever. A summary of all those, and then again your statement of, your side, like which side are you on? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Whatever. And that was what I followed for task 2. And then for task 1, I think because the prompt is quite clear, it's much easier. But something you should definitely pay attention to is your tone, which is, I think, again, something that actually cost me my score, because I had to write to my landlord and I didn't know if I'm going to be friendly or should I have to be really formal. Because it's a landlord, it's not an executive body, it's not your boss, it's not a university or something like that. So I didn't know what to do, so it was a mixture of those. But my teacher told me that because you should only be friendly to your friends and your landlord isn't your friend, you probably should have been more formal and you should have explained your ideas more formally. And again, that was probably something that cost me. I wish I practiced more, but hopefully, it's still good. I'm still happy about my score, obviously. Lastly, and most surprisingly, is the speaking part of the test. The speaking test actually killed me and brought me back to life. I'm serious. Like the stress that I went through after that speaking exam, after that 10-15 minute conversation with the examiner, was so stressful, so incredibly life-changing that I just couldn't bear it. I'm thrilled that I actually gave the computer-delivered IELTS test, because the answers usually come in 3 to 5 days. If like the paper-based test, the results would take, 2 weeks to arrive, I really don't think that I could handle that. I didn't really prepare for the speaking test beforehand. Like, I actually rehearsed the part 1, part 2, part 3 of the speaking test with my personal tutor, but that was it. Like, I didn't really study any uncommon words. I didn't actually memorize any idioms. I was just myself. I felt confident that I can just handle that and get it like a band-aid easily. And so I had this in my mind, like this was my pre-assumption before going to the examiner's room, and to sit there, and everything was great. Actually, I think my part 1 was quite good. I introduced myself, I explained that I work and study at the same time, and I talked about a few things. But as we reached part 2, the examiner actually asked me about describing a garden. And because I didn't have any normal idea about a garden in my mind, I explained the greenhouse section of a store, like a very famous and big flower shop. And I said, although this is not a garden, this is the most close, this is the closest thing in my mind about a garden. And I started explaining that. And I was feeling good about it, I felt quite confident, until the point that the examiner actually told me that, okay, this is the end of your part 2, now we're going to talk about part 3. She told me that, unlike what you just mentioned, this is going to be where we talk about a garden where people grow vegetables and fruits. So this is a type of garden that I'm going to ask you questions about. And it was then that I felt like I messed up. I didn't completely understand the prompt. I gave an irrelevant answer. And that's the part that I just lost myself. I said, all right, I'm never gonna get a 7.5 even. And so she started asking me questions about those types of gardens. Is it good to grow flowers, or are people still going to grow vegetables in the future? And my answers weren't really that relevant either. Like, I gave philosophical answers. Like, I said that I think, growing vegetables is like the cycle of life, and it reminds us of, how we die in each season and how we are going to be brought back to life. And like, the answers were just quite, they weren't these technical, like the ones that you find in these example speakings. Like, usually people give really to the point answers, they really expand their ideas, they use uncommon words. My words weren't like that. Like, I was just speaking, like as I'm speaking to you right now, I was speaking just like this in the test itself. And I talked about all these different ideas, and the main thing, like the added stress came to me because the examiner kept interrupting me in part 3. Like, I was giving the answer for 20 seconds and she just gave me a follow-up question. Like, she just asked me something about the answer that I just gave her. And she just kept, asking these questions like, do you really think this is the case? What about that? So there's no point in doing this? So she just asked me these types of questions as if I was conversing with a friend or a colleague. And just right, from the top of my head, I just gave answers. I was ready to just have a conversation with her. And I really, stopped focusing on using any complex grammar or any irregular words. I just kept talking. I just kept listening to her. I just had this conversation. The conversation was flowing very fast. Like, I was talking very fast, and I wasn't even there. Like, I couldn't really control myself. So I was just having this conversation, and then at the end of the test, she said, so, do you think that governments should also play a role in promoting, vegetables or, taking care of the gardens or whatever? And I said, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And right then she said, thank you. That's it. Have a nice day. She didn't even let me speak more than 2 words. Like, she just interrupted me right away, and that was it. And I left the room not knowing if it's a good thing, if the examiner keeps challenging you or keeps interrupting you, or if it's a bad thing. Like, I just had no idea. And I just left the room not knowing what's gonna happen. And during those 3.5 days that I waited to receive the results, this was my feeling. Like, this is how I felt, not knowing if I'm ever going to get a 7.5 even. Like, I thought I'm gonna get a 7. And once the results came in, I was quite shocked because I had received 8.5 in speaking. And that was completely surprising. Like, I just couldn't understand. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was flabbergasted because, like, I didn't expect it to be that high. So I spoke to my tutor, I explained everything, and I just told her about all the story. And she said, well, an examiner's job is to challenge you to see how well you can speak. It's not any scientific test. This is not a general information test. This is a speaking test. This is a language test. So she wants to know how well you can listen and answer. How easy is it for you to just make sentences? How natural do you sound? How much does it seem like a normal conversation that's going to happen in an English-speaking country? Like, they want to see how well spoken you are, they want to see how well spoken you are, how fast you are, how easy it is for you. And that's exactly what she did. And she realized that I'm ready. Like, I know how to handle situations like that. I can express myself easily. And this is what she scored. Like, this is how she evaluated my English speaking proficiency and my ability to talk. And that was a revelation that really helped me understand the speaking test more. I'm not gonna say that stop reading these irregular words or stop trying to use complex grammar. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying the most important thing is how natural you sound and how much this conversation feels like a normal conversation. Instead of you forcing these uncommon words or super complex grammar to give your answers. And I would actually suggest you actually go out and look at some other YouTube videos that are about band score candidates, and none of them use any especially weird words or, I don't know, Shakespeare-like words or complex grammar. Everybody's speaking very fluently, very easily. They're expressing their ideas really clearly, and that's what's, I think, the main importance. Yeah, that's kind of my whole experience. I hope that this was useful to you. I hope that this helped you have a clear idea about what's going to happen in the test itself. I tried to explain everything, how I felt, what happened, and then what I felt afterwards. And also, I didn't use any weird materials. Again, I only used the Cambridge books themselves. And also, I looked at a lot of YouTube videos about people just doing the speaking test, which I think is going to be quite helpful to your confidence and how you're going to have to feel about the test. I mentioned my tutor. I'm going to again give you the credentials, give you the contact information. So if you wanted to have a class with her, you can always, just have a conversation with her, see how well it can match your schedule or her schedule. I don't know. Just because people ask me, like, just introduce us to your tutor, I'm going to mention her. And that's about it. If you have any questions, if you have any further, questions or any inquiries about, the test itself, any other questions, please comment below. I'm going to answer all of them. And that's about it. I wish you all the best in your upcoming test, and I hope that everything goes well. And that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope I can catch you in the next one.